Today's parasha is Yitro, and Mauricio wrote it in Spanish, and I've translated in English, and we'll read it to you today. This is from Matityahu 18, verses 2-4. He called a child and put him in the midst of them. So he said, I assure you that unless you change and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, the one who humbles himself like this child will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. We read in our portion the following. And Yitro, Kohen of Midian, priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and how the Eternal had brought Israel out of Egypt. Let's just take a pause here. Previously, in Exodus 4:18, Yitro is introduced by the name of Yeter, and it says, and Moshe went and returned to Yeter, his father-in-law. Was his name Yeter? Is there now an error in the Torah where he's called Yitro instead of Yeter? Well, the secret, according to many Torah scholars, is that it changed with the use of an active verb, vayishma, which is actively listening in order to obey. Changing his name from Yeter, which means increase or augment, to Yitro, which means overflow or excellence, caused a renewal within his internal being. The difference between the two names in Hebrew is the letter Vav that was added, and it was taken from the divine name Yud-He Vav-He. According to Rashi, from this moment on, he was also known as Hovav, because he loved the Torah. At the end, we see how a man who believed in superior forces was transformed upon hearing the stories of how God had manifested himself to Moshe, Israel, and the entire world. And thus, he decided to start believing that there is only one force, one God, one single power, the Borei Olam. I loved how Rabbi Adi Kangado depicted the change that Yeter underwent to become Yitro. The difference is the letter Vav, a Yud that goes down to earth, implying a subtle conversion, because what is a Vav added to the name Yitro? Says the Rabbi, the Vav is a Yud referring to the intellectual, the abstract. How it goes down to earth symbolizes the arrival of human thought to real, practical conclusions that serve to improve their behavior and sanctify life. This down-to-earth transformation is a daily attitude. This attitude of listening, opening the senses, in this case the ear, implies humility. And in this portion, at least, what I have continually seen is that much humility is required. That is how gratitude can be manifested, even for whatever good things happen to those around us. Unity and emunah, faith, are also manifested. Yitro's merit is that many heard what God had done for Israel upon their departure from Egypt, but only he listened, only he reacted and abandoned his beliefs as a pagan priest to join Israel on the border of Sinai. Today's call continues. God speaks to us in many ways, but unfortunately, as Job 33:14 says, God speaks to us over and over again, although we do not perceive it. But why are we unable to perceive it? There seems to be a connection to our Haftarah in Isaiah when he says, and he said, go and tell this people, you do indeed hear, but you do not understand. And you do indeed see, but you do not perceive. Make the heart of this people insensitive, dull their ears and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and return and be healed. Elie Wiesel once said, the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. The opposite of beauty is not ugliness, it is indifference. In turn, the opposite of faith is not heresy, it is indifference. Exactly. To be indifferent to the voice of God is to hear, but pretend not to understand. Whoever is indifferent cannot perceive his world, cannot be grateful, cannot realize that God exists. Today, the indifference in this material world is incredible. For example, I remember when I was very little and we went for a walk, one of the things that I enjoyed the most was seeing the landscape, the houses, the people, animals, etc. on our road. It was an experience. Today, young people going for a walk have their eyes glued to their phones. And when you ask, did you see that animal or did you see the scenery? Nobody noticed because they were engrossed in their apps or their streaming. The same with God. He continually calls us. Are we like Yitro? Do we perceive God's voice? Another merit of Yitro is that he rejoiced in the good that happened to others. Exodus 18:10 says, and Yitro rejoiced for all the good that the Eternal had done to Israel, whom he delivered from the hands of the Egyptians. The expression is connected with the words we hear later, which is a more negative perspective in chapter 20, verse 14. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that belongs to your neighbor. If someone tells us a blessing, a joy, something good from the Eternal towards them, a miracle, and we are incapable of rejoicing for them, we must examine our hearts. When we really rejoice in God's goodness towards another, without questioning, how did he do it? Surely there's a catch here. I can't believe it. Why can't I then? Among the many other expressions, we form guidelines on how to fulfill the commandment to not covet. The next merit in Shemot 18:10, and Yitro said, blessed be the Eternal who has delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, freeing the Egyptians from freeing the people from the oppression of the Egyptians. Yitro blessed the name of the Eternal with an expression that is recorded as the first blessing in the Torah towards the Eternal. Perhaps there were other blessings before by the divine manifestation towards one's own cause, but perhaps the merit in this case comes because the Eternal is being blessed through the blessing of others. Finally, Yitro's merit was to give, to multiply, to share, to magnify the divine name, as it says in chapter 18:12. And Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took an offering, an olah, which is everything goes up in ascension completely to God. And he sacrifices for God. And Aaron and all the elders of Israel came to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Now, a person who has undergone change generates goodness, is a giving machine, and he does not go unnoticed by the Eternal. Yitro also establishes the system of judges, later known as the Sanhedrin, according to many commentators. And according to many, the Torah could not have been taught and spread to all the people without this system of communication and the conflict resolution advised by Yitro. This story can also be compared to a very practical way of teaching the 10 words. Let's see. Anochi Adonai Elohecha. I am the Eternal, your God. Upon hearing the stories of the Exodus, Yitro came to the conclusion that there is only one God. One wonders, how is it that this expression is a commandment? The commandment is to actively, consistently, and with your mind and your soul believe that there is just one God. If there's no God, the rest of the Torah would be invalid. In this sense, emunah, faith, is manifested in that there is only one who controls all that happens to us and who seeks our good. You will have no other gods before my face. Lo yihyeh lecha adon Elohim acharim al panai. Yitro stopped believing in other spiritual sources. You shall not pronounce the name of the Lord, your eternal, your God, in vain. Lo tisa et shem Adonai Elohecha leshav. Yitro blessed the divine name. Respecting the Shabbat, although there is no record, it is said in the Midrash that he lived for about a year with Israel, that Yitro lived for about a year with Israel. And it is recorded that he stayed to eat with Moshe and his princes. So it's very likely that he celebrated the Shabbat. Kaved et avicha v'et emecha. Honor your father and your mother. We see Moshe honoring his father-in-law as if he were his father by listening to him, sharing with him all his blessings and sitting at the table with him. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov, lo taneh v'rayacha ed sheker. Somehow, in this portion, we do not see any murder unless we're referring to the death of the Egyptians, according to the testimony about the Exodus, which was not fake news. And you shall not steal is fulfilled by what was offered to God. You shall not covet, lo tachmod, was fulfilled with the joy of Yitro for the works of the Eternal. What do we need to hear his voice? If we compare our Haftarah with the Parashah, both Yitro and Isaiah heard the voice of the Eternal. But to listen, we need, as Rabbi Yeshua told us, to have the attitude of a child. Why? First, children are like sponges, flexible to receive new knowledge. They do not have a structured paradigm of what reality is or preconceived ideas. Second, a child has the humility to recognize that he is learning and that he is not a know-it-all. Third, a child has quite an innocent emunah and believes what he is told. Even a 9 to 10-year-old child who is told that there are pink elephants, surely they'd believe it if his dad told him. On the other hand, if we do not have this ability to learn like a child, we will only have arrogance and we will sink like Pharaoh in their pride, in our pride, in his pride. Do we want to be transformed? If so, let us have the emunah of a child. Let us listen to the voice of the Eternal. Let us awaken our senses to the spiritual world unacknowledged by most. Let us rejoice in the blessings of others. Let us bless the Eternal for everything and be grateful people, demonstrated by our acts of charity and kindness toward others. Shabbat Shalom.